Hello everyone, so today I have a fun video. Technically we're like about 2 years into the pandemic at this point, so maybe this is not new news, but I wanted to put my own 2 cents into this because today I want to be talking about how to conduct good virtual client meetings. So recently I've been doing a lot of design sessions and I realized that there's a lot of things that can be improved and can be always worked on. And these are a few things that I've done and I wanted to share this with you. So the first thing is I want to say virtual meetings should not be treated the same exact way as normal meetings are, okay? Because like now you're at home and you have all these engagements and all of these distractions, and not to mention you can have multitasking. So instead of being present in a room, you have to worry about maybe someone's like texting on the side or someone's eating on the side. Like you have to be conscious about that. So I did want to say this because some of the things I'm going to be saying today are not going to be technical, but more about how do we make sure that the behaviors during the call are basically going to be just as good as if you were in person. So some of the first things I want to start is video or no video. And I know everyone's going to be like, I hate video because then I have to put on makeup. When I asked my Instagram followers, this like majority didn't even wear makeup. Honestly, I don't even wear makeup. Sometimes I don't even wear anything other than PJs. Getting myself out there, but sometimes I just wear a t-shirt. So because of that, I wanted to kind of share this a little bit because why do we want to be on video? And I think like you don't have to be on video all the time. It's ideal, but if you really had to, it's really good to do it on the first few sessions before you ever met them before, and also really critical sessions. So for me, I just started a new project. It's a nonprofit, and we just start design sessions in January. So for this, like the client in general is always going to be on video, but for me, I'm like not used to it because my past clients have actually not turned on video, even when we were actually like not even in person or anything like that. We just did not turn it on because, you know, people just didn't want to show their faces. But for me, I always just turn it off. For the first few sessions though, it's so critical, especially if you're the one leading the session, to actually turn on your video. So that way, if you were to introduce yourself, like you can actually show your facial expressions. And in some cases, actually, I really like it because in that case, I can see like when I'm working, if I turn on my video, they'll tend to turn on their video. I mean, in this case, the client actually turns on the video in general, and then I come second. A lot of times when I turn on my video, I see everyone else turns it on after that, especially around lunchtime. Like that's when people like to turn it off. But this is really good because then I can see like maybe someone left their chair. And actually I did have a session where the key person left their chair. So I actually pointed out and said like, hey, should we wait for this person because we're going to need it for this decision? That's a really good point. Other than that, like you can't really tell because someone could be just muting, or they're just going to be off video, or they're not even, they're like super quiet in the chat. You have to be very conscious about that. So now when it comes to sharing my screen, I've actually had this experience for 3 years now. It's not even during the pandemic because we always share our screen. And this is just something that I always see newcomers do that they just like regret afterwards. First thing is mark do not disturb. Like there's so many times when I've been on sessions with clients where I'm not actually going to be the one that's presenting, but I'm the one that's like watching it. And I can see it happening because a lot of times like when you don't mark as do not disturb on other systems, like let's say, give you an example of Zoom. And then if you're on Zoom and then you actually use Microsoft Teams with your team, or Accenture in this case, like we use Microsoft Teams, and you don't mark do not disturb. And this is the thing, is that if like you did it within Microsoft Teams, they're just going to automatically know and just like block all the notifications. If you do it on Zoom, it's not connected to something like Microsoft Teams. So you always have to be conscious about that because now you could be sharing your screen and now things are going to be popping up. There's a way around it where you just like share just the window and not the whole screen. But a lot of times, like if you're doing a lot of demos, like PowerPoint decks and demos, and then you have like other resources that you want to pull up, you probably don't have that luxury other than like constantly switching between the screens, and you probably don't want to do that. But for this, I would always say, do not disturb on everything, like just do that. And this is like only really prevalent if you have something where it doesn't automatically sense it. So like Zoom versus Microsoft Teams or Google Hangouts or Google Meet, like all these kind of different systems. Be very conscious about that because there's even times when I was in the room, and this is like before the pandemic, where the person presenting did not have do not disturb on their Zoom on their Microsoft Teams, but they were presenting on Zoom because the client was using Zoom at the time. So from that, we literally just stared at like the notifications coming up, like we're just pinging on the side. Honestly, sometimes not really the best things to be screen sharing. Like sometimes it's all smack talking about the client or something about like about some employee that is in the room that the other clients would actually know who they are. Like you just just kind of have to stop that. And when you're screen sharing, like that's the last thing you want to do is pull that up to mark it as do not disturb, and now everyone can see what you're doing. So you don't want to do that. Mark it as do not disturb. Like just don't do that. It's just so wrong. The other one is like, I always prefer this, especially if I have multiple screens, and if you don't have multiple screens, try to do like an iPad or like your phone or something like that, where you can have like an additional screen of a chat on the side. So you have one with the client and then you have one with your team. So if anything were to ever come up where maybe you just don't know the answer, or you want to collaborate with someone, like maybe someone's like saying, oh, I want to see the implications of this on that module, then you probably want to message on the side. Or maybe if you have something where, oh my God, I can't answer this, I really need this person in the room, you can say, hey, Abigail, can you join this call? Like you could put this on the side, but you don't want to pull it up in front of the call where everyone can see all the conversations you're having. So you want to have it on the side. And I like to do that on the side for any questions that come up, or if I have anyone that I want to pull in last minute if I have to. It's always preferable that way. Or if there's any like updates back behind the scenes that you weren't aware of that happened either in another call or in the past that you did not know of. I've had situations like that where I'm going over something and then I just like ask them something that has already been asked 2 days ago that I just did not know of because we just didn't talk about it. So something like that has come up before. We're like, oh, we talked about this. Like you don't have to ask about that, and then kind of go in like a different whole rabbit hole there. So I like to have a chat on the side. And if you can't do that, you could just try to screen share your one window and then maybe have that. But it's also very risky because sometimes you may accidentally make mistakes and actually do it for your entire window, and now you're gonna make a mistake. So you wanna do that. The other one is like you have to, I think like what's really important, especially with PowerPoints, if you don't have like a mouse that like ends up getting bigger as you move, like how a lot of Macs do, especially because like your mouse does actually blend in with the white a lot of times, is just say, look at your left hand side, look at the right corner over there. And you can use your mouse to kind of circle around something, but a lot of times when you do like bad internet, you're not really gonna see that well. You're gonna have to say, look on your right hand side or look at that blue bar. You want to be able to say that, like sure, you're sharing your screen, but you're virtual. If you're in person, you could probably like literally point at it, but if you're virtual, you're not. So you're gonna have to be very careful about that. And I think it's really important, especially if you have a lot of things on a screen and you don't want to overwhelm them. Say like, oh, let's start with the top left side and then we go down from there. And then from there, you can kind of go from that. So anyone who wasn't necessarily paying attention can actually just like, oh, I have something to look at, even if they were technically supposed to be looking. It's also kind of like a attention grabber there. So now it's engagement. And I know like a lot of times when you're in person, it's kind of just easy to look at their facial expression, but when you're presenting or when you're doing something, you probably don't have the luxury to look at everyone's expression, especially if you have like 50 plus people in the room, you don't have the luxury to do that. So a lot of times what I end up doing is in the very beginning, I ask like, is everyone present? Everyone who's needed for this presentation present, and you don't start until they are there, because the last thing you want to do is that you go through this entire presentation and then you realize that the people didn't even show up, and then like the people who were supposed to be there didn't even show up, and you have to redo the whole thing, or they have to look at the recording, or you're going to schedule another session. You don't want that. So you want to be able to ask them, are they there? And it's something that like when you do it in a way where it's in person, they probably have to be on person anyways, because that's like their only thing on their calendar. But when you're remote, there's a lot of other issues going on, because maybe they have something at home, maybe they took time off, and then maybe they ended up taking a different call, maybe they're running late from another call. There's like all these other things, and people just don't necessarily know what's going on all the time, compared to like if you're in the office and you see someone go to that room. Now you know they went to that room. Remotely, you can't tell that unless you literally see someone go from like available to presenting. Then that's like the only way I could tell someone's actually presenting. A lot of times we want to be very specific with making sure everyone in the room is actually present and actually available to have the conversation. If maybe someone says like, oh, I don't think we could talk about this, you want to first double check the agenda if this is everything okay with the people in the room, and then from there you can move forward. And I think like a small talk is also very important. I'm not really a fan of small talk, to be honest, and going in person, it's easier to do that because then you could talk about like whatever's in the room or maybe like the weather outside. But here, like everyone could be from all across the country, all across the world. So some people have talked about weather. Some people have talked about like, oh my God, look at my cat, so cute, hoo, hoo, hoo. And then you can also talk about a lot of other things too, like maybe what they're wearing. I have a client that literally wears polka dots every Thursday and we just talk about it all the time. But you want to do small talk because then it kind of breaks the ice that you're not virtual, okay? So like if it's just everyone's silent and then you start, there's a disconnect. Like not a lot of people are gonna connect with that. You wanna make sure that everyone's laughing and smiling. And again, this is where the video turns on is really important because then you can actually get that connection remotely as well. So another thing that I always want to do is like calling out people that are directly related to the content I'm talking about at that moment. So let's say, for example, I'm talking to the finance accounting team, talking to the IT team, and I'm talking to the CFO. And then maybe there's something particularly important to the CFO that I know about, that they talked about before, or that's something that the CFO wanted. I would say like, oh, John, are you currently on the call right now? I just wanted to make sure because I'm currently talking about this that you care about or this that you wanted. If he or she says yes, then I will move forward. And then I said like, here, do you have any questions about that? That way I can tell that maybe the CFO who's like super busy or something like that is actually knowledgeable and aware about what I'm about to talk about. Instead of like, oh, wait, what? I was actually like multitasking. I don't know what you're talking about. Doing that can really engage them because you always have to be conscious about their time. And I always try to prioritize like someone's availability. Like maybe they're only available the first half of the call. Maybe someone's available the first 10 minutes of the call. And then I would just move some things on the agenda around for that reason. When you're in person, you don't necessarily get that luxury. Everyone's technically there or they leave early or they come back late. But when it's virtual, there could be like a lot of different balancing calls that they have to do, especially if they're working with another time zone. So I always like to call out to people that I know should be there or at least care about the particular content and say, what do you think about this? Or any questions about that? And this could be more conversational. You don't want to make it where you're just constantly talking and you don't know what's actually happening. You want to make sure that they're actually digesting it and they care about what you're talking about. And a lot of times I even level set in the very beginning that today I'm going to be talking about X, Y, and Z. And then do we have the right audience for this? Or do we think that we want to add something? Or do you think that we should table this topic another day because of the audience or because of the priorities that we're having on the project? That's something that's really important to set in the beginning, because then you can also kind of hear about like, oh, I'm only here for the first 30 minutes. Can we cover that first? And you get these conversations. You want to be flexible though. In person, you may not get that issue as much just because people are technically present there. But if you also have people that are like, oh, I'm going to leave early, then you can also work around that too. So this is something that works in person and also remotely. But I think this is like very important when you do it remotely. All right, so those are most of the virtual client meeting tips that I have that I thought was really helpful for me, that no one really taught me. I just something learned over time. But let me know down below if you have a comment about like maybe a tip that I had, or maybe that you want to share a tip. Really let me know, because I'm always looking to see how I can improve my virtual client meeting game or just my virtual call game in general. So let me know. Thank you everyone, and see you guys next time. Bye.